Hello, and welcome back to the Healthcare Executive Insights podcast. My name is Elliot Sloan with the Macallan Group. And today we are very excited to announce our guest, Miss Leslie Basham, who's the president and CEO of Surgical Directions. Leslie, thanks so much for taking time to chat with us today.
Thank you, Elliot. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for asking.
The pleasure is all ours. So tell us a little bit about your professional background, and then tell us a little more about your organization, Surgical Directions.
Absolutely. So, Elliot, I joined healthcare. I'm a relatively new healthcare person for this day and age. I joined about 12 years ago. I was a recovering investment banker and aerospace executive, and I have taken a lot of those learnings and that financial caliber into healthcare. And I was a consulting. So I'm not a clinician, but I am a smart non-clinician in that I surround myself with clinicians so that I am always informed and can go to the experts when needed for different items. But I have been in consulting, and now I am the president and chief executive officer for Surgical Directions. So I used to work at a big global consulting company, and found my way to surgical because it really puts me right with the patient, right with the hospitals and health systems. In our day-to-day life, we're wearing scrubs. You know, Elliot, we talked about this before, in going into the OR and seeing the procedures and watching what really these clinicians are up against in delivering great care. And that's what we do. So Surgical Directions is a tech-enabled services company. So we offer consulting, technology, and leadership placement, high-end leadership placements with things like OR directors, chiefs of anesthesia. We help health systems and provider groups have a more efficient and higher performing procedural services. So we work across the country. We've worked with over 400 different healthcare clients to improve financial, organizational, and operational outcomes. And now more than ever, there's such a need, right, for that financial stability and access for patient care.
Sure. Yeah, it's certainly something that you see needs a little bit of fine tuning. I think with most health systems is maximizing the efficiency and optimizing their operating rooms.
Right.
Would you agree that a lot of these health systems have common issues where you're seeing gaps in the overall operation?
Yeah, they do. And it's, I think everybody, so OR, surgical services, generates about 65% of hospital profit margin, and about 65-70% of revenue. It's a huge driver. It is the largest driver of patient spend. And so it's this very, very important department of a hospital. And so you need it to run well, right? You need it to be efficient. You need it to be a great place to work, and that patients want to go to for care. And so the people, the healthcare executives that I'm talking to, understand that, appreciate that, want to be better. And there are common issues. So some of the biggest issues, right, are surgeon and patient access. So people are coming back to care now post-COVID. And so how do you make sure that they don't have to wait 3 to 6 months to get that appointment? And so how do you make sure that there's the right access, that there is predictability in scheduling? And this is particularly important with today. And I'm sure it's all over your podcast, right? The staffing challenges that are happening with nursing and anesthesiology and staff across healthcare and across the country, really. And so how do you make sure that you can make a predictable schedule a great place to work for those people so that they want to stay and provide great care? And so access, 3 things: access, staffing, and then overall the financial stability of the organization, right? So you need to be bringing in, making sure that you have the right case at the right place across your health system, and thinking about your your patient mix and how it's scheduled in, prime time versus overtime, and making sure that you're really, healthcare isn't about the financials, right? It's about providing great patient care, but you can't provide great patient care unless you have that financial stability. And so that's what I am hearing a lot of across those 3 areas.
So tell me, how often are you going into a health system and saying, okay, we need to make some changes on executive level team, or we need to retrain some of the managers and leaders in the organization?
Yeah, there's always training. There's always training and education. So every time there's that. And a lot of it is the communication, right? People may know certain things, but they're not communicating that. And it's communicating it from the CEO down, and from the, SPD tech and up and out. And so how central sterile processing. And so how do we make sure that there's that communication? And more frequently, unfortunately, because of the shortage in staffing, it may not be that you need to turn over a leader, but it may be that leader isn't there anymore. There's a vacant position, right? And so it's really hard to do even those micro changes if there isn't a strong leader. And so, we'll work with health systems to put in that interim OR director or chief of anesthesia to make sure there's that leadership to drive the change, and ideally to build a mentor, build a leader from within your organization that can then take that on. Because frequently people have, those high potential folks that maybe just have 5 or so many years of experience post-schooling, but they have those natural born leadership capabilities. And how can we accelerate that maturity to get them in a leadership position to be successful, right? Because you don't want to put them in too soon.
Yeah, I've always believed that being a healthcare organization, you really are in the customer service industry. You just happen to be providing healthcare services.
Right.
And I think it's taken healthcare so long to adopt that mentality, where other industries have really thrived with that customer service first.
Yeah. And now there's so much competition, not just in a market between health systems, but also the site of care. So there's a large shift to ambulatory and even to home care and virtual care. And so where one goes, and you would think this wouldn't necessarily impact surgery, right? You would think you must go to a hospital for surgery. Well, that's changing, right? There's a lot of surgery that's happening in an outpatient facility, in an ambulatory surgery center, or even in your physician's office. And so hospitals and health systems have to think about that with the greater consumer choice of where to seek care. Then what is the role of the hospital? What is the role of the clinician? And the patient in that decision making, and how can you influence and take ownership, right? Because we guide a lot of our health systems. Care is moving to an ambulatory setting, right? Ambulatory care growth is rapidly outpacing acute care center surgical volume growth, and so you either have a piece of that or you don't, right? Yep. And you want to make sure, yes, your reimbursements will be lower, most likely in an ambulatory care center environment, but you'd rather that and holding on to that patient within your network versus losing that, or more importantly, that surgeon within your network versus losing that altogether. Not that a surgeon is more important than a patient, but a surgeon brings in many patients.
Of course, especially with the pandemic, people are going to try to stay away from hospitals unless it's an absolute emergency. And people prefer the convenience of ASCs and ambulatory care centers. That's actually one of the topics I wanted to discuss with you. As a hospital, as a health system, what are the best ambulatory care strategies for hospitals? How do they cover, or how do they provide that, fill in that gap of care for people who want to potentially be able to get procedures done more conveniently at an ASC?
Yes. So Elliot, I think it's a good question, because they need to be thinking about ambulatory care, and they need to be thinking about what cases go where, right? There's a ton of clinical studies that the more frequently a surgeon does a surgery, the better he or she gets at that surgery, right? So you want to make sure that you're not distributing too much where that nobody has a great enough exposure to any particular type of procedure. And so it's creating sort of centers of excellence and understanding what of those centers of excellence, what types of procedures should move to an ambulatory care center versus stay in the main, what type of patient should move, right? Because there's certain patients that even if they're getting a total knee, which can be done in an ASC, you still want them to be in the hospital because of the other conditions that they have, or because of their age. And so safety first always. And so, but thinking about what cases go where, and also thinking about what, your total ASC strategy, where what surgeon groups are you partnering with, right? So many times today, there is a joint venture, some sort of mutual benefit that the organizations can have. And so if you don't have that, you're competing with other organizations that are offering that, and you may be able to open it, but you'll probably won't have loyalty with those surgeons if that's not part of it. So designing the structure and the location in the facility so that there is incentives for cases to be done, because what you don't want to do is open a facility that nobody comes to, right? So figuring out what cases go where, and then in your main OR, in your main hospital, you'll have an outmigration of cases, as I mentioned before. So how do you right size your main OR? And the good thing is today there's such a backlog that there's probably cases that can come in, and you just have to redesign your surgeon access system, your block schedule, so that you're now designing it around those surgeons that need to do their cases in the hospital versus the ASC.
Sure.
But if there's not, then just right size it, right? Don't run as many rooms, which today isn't, unfortunately, a problem, because very few people can even run the rooms they need to run because of short staffing. But this is a great opportunity to look at your facility as if it's, recently I've been playing the game of Risk with my family, with my children, and, look at the full picture, right? Look at the full board and say, what should go where, right? And I only have so many resources, and I have more likely than not more patient needs than resources to meet those needs. And so let's optimize our current facilities so that maybe you do run, if you have 20 ORs in your hospital, maybe you just run 15, but you're able to shift some of those to an ASC environment that's easier to staff nurses and anesthesia, because they don't have to take call, and they have an easier, not easier, but a more predictable schedule.
Sure.
So thinking about those different factors really help in designing and executing upon that ambulatory surgery center strategy.
Sure. So do you feel that health systems are now competing a lot with these large MSOs like the USPIs, the United Surgical Partners of the world? Is that kind of a competitor for some of your clients?
It's interesting. It all depends, right? Because a lot of times they're all partnered together, right? Sure. So there's a term called co-opetition, right? Take your competition and make it a partnership, partnership ecosystem, or cooperate. And so in a lot of places, those health systems are working with the USPIs or the SCAs and the surgeons, right? They're sort of a split all three ways.
Sure.
And then sometimes not, right? So it's many times a competitor is also your partner in a different geography.
Sure.
And it's something to be thoughtful of
So for most health systems, do you think to get their numbers back to pre-pandemic, is it mostly because they don't have the labor to perform the services, or is it because they don't have the patients electing for the surgeries like they used to?
So I would have said it's about the labor, right? It's really about the labor. Now there's a lot of, because patients were coming back, now we have a lot of economic factors happening in our economy with interest rates. I think the jobs report was up this past week. So I think unemployment is down. People have jobs, but jobs are so important, right? Because that comes with jobs, comes insurance, and insurance comes people's ability to more freely seek care.
Sure.
And so I think patient volume is up if you take the economic side out, and really volume is constrained because of the staffing. But now we have to play that into, healthcare is a huge spend for people. And there is a lot of uncertainty in our economy. And so people may be thinking about that, especially on elective cases, whether they also have the funds to be able to seek care, which is
well, you would think
issue.
Q4, after a lot of people have hit their deductibles, this should be a busy few months for most health systems, hopefully.
Exactly. We always see, we see the rush in the last quarter.
Tell me this. What do you think is the starting point for a lot of your clients to really optimize their operation? Taking staffing shortages out of the picture, let's pretend that facilities can easily hire the right people.
Yeah.
I'm envisioning like a NASCAR pit crew, right? You got to be quick, you got to be well-oiled, and everyone's got to be on the same page and the same cadence. And I really don't know the answer to this. But what makes a great OR, or what makes a great NASCAR team? Yeah. Is it the people, or is it the tools that they have? Yeah,
that's a great analogy. I love that NASCAR pit. I'm not pit. See this, I don't know enough. Yeah, I don't know enough about it, but I'm visualizing what you're talking about. But I love that analogy because that's what it is, right? It is a lot of people coming together with different skill sets that need to be doing their job really well and need to know what other people are doing at the same time. And so I talked earlier about the Surgical Services Executive Committee that we set up in any organization. That's, every other week or a monthly committee, you get together. That does a lot to make sure that you're driving the strategy and the outcomes. But you need that pit crew meeting more frequently, right? And so what we set up is there's something frequently used at health systems called the daily huddle. Well, we've really supercharged that with how it's organized. We call it the collaborative daily review, but you need to be thinking about your patients 24, 48, 72 hours in advance. What's the schedule like? Do they have the right patient prep? Do we have the right team on board? Do we have the right tools? And this is a multidisciplinary team, right? It's nursing, it's SBD, it's your PAT folks, it's your anesthesiologist, it's PT, it's all the full care team, right? And they're meeting, it's a 15-minute meeting maybe, right? But you're going through that schedule and you're making sure that everybody's RCM, you're making sure everybody is involved and aware of what's coming down the pipe so you can proactively address these issues. And so that's one aspect. And then it is the tools, right? So you need great people. You need a culture where people will communicate and bring up issues and not feel like they will be harmed by bringing up those issues, and create that energy, that team around that purpose. And then also have the tools so that you can have the data and have the insights to know, right? Has the patient there's a ton of information, right? What we're not lacking for is data. right, and information.
How
But
do
what
you
we are
use it?
lacking is organized data and insights associated with that data.
Yep.
And that really helps. That collaborative daily review is amazing meeting when you have it up on the screen. You're looking at the patients, you're looking at the schedule, you're seeing that, oh, maybe, that one's really complex. And, do we have the right people on call to support that case? And that has multiple surgeons, and where's the device rep, and all of that needs to be done. And it's complex, right?
Yep.
But there's an energy to that. Like the surgical services has such an energy. It is more, it's frequently an intense environment, but with that becomes a lot of, people thrive in that environment. And so it's the right tools and the right people. And I would argue it's having the right people first, right? Because if you have a great tool and people don't know how to use it or aren't empowered to use it, the tool will fail. But if you have great people, they'll figure it out, right? They'll figure it out. But you don't want to lose those great people because you're not giving them the tools to be successful. And there's so much coming at it, private equity and venture capital. And, there's just a ton of technologies coming into healthcare. And so how do you know what's the right one, what you should be using? And so that's important too, because you make a commitment when you invest in those.
And Leslie, I'll leave you with this question. What do you think are the most pressing issues for health systems going into 2023? Aside from labor shortages.
Yeah. I'm sure you hear that a lot. Aside from labor shortages. No, I think it goes to financial stability, right? There's a lot of uncertainty. Interest rates are raising. A lot of health systems have a lot of debt, right? And as the rates on that debt increases, it creates pressure. And we're in a market where really cash is king. So making sure that you have a strong financial position is one of the biggest items. And then how do you, now that there is such disruption in care and people, moving around for care, how do you become that the place that patients want to go for care, right? And healthcare in a lot of ways is still local, right? So how are you serving your community, the patients you serve in your community as a health system and administrator and as a provider? How are you differentiating your care versus other competitors' care and making sure that's, it's experience, it's access, it's value, it's fit, because care is stressful and many other factors, but you want to attract those patients and get them through efficiently, because you likely have a backlog, have constrained resources, and there's not really the ability to let people, have these long lengths of stay or wait 6-9 months for a procedure. They'll go elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'm hearing is health systems should stay aggressive with their content creation and their messaging and staying out, educating their communities on the changes and improvements they've made, the technology investments they've made, the recruiting efforts they've made to bring the best and brightest minds to their facility, and just not really assuming people know, but being very proactive in getting all these wins out there to their local communities.
Yeah, to their local communities and to their own community, to their own staff, right? Because people, I think today, because everyone's so busy and everyone's so the world is a little bit more complex. Health systems administrators are doing a ton of good things for their staff, but how are you communicating it in a way that they really can hear it and listen to it and appreciate it? And so it's getting that message out to the community, the external community, and to their own internal community. And it really goes to purpose, right? I did a mission trip recently in Honduras, And it was a reminder, this organization was so driven to their purpose of providing care to those that didn't have access to good care. And many health systems are nonprofit, but it didn't feel quite like this one, right? And so how do you bring that purpose back? How do you communicate that purpose? And like I said earlier, we all went into healthcare because maybe not everybody, but most of us went into healthcare because we have this purpose to make the world a better place, to heal those that are hurting. And that's a great unifier.
The power
message.
The power of serving.
Yeah.
That's why most people get into healthcare, because they want to serve. And that's what really keeps them motivated every day.
Right. So let's bring that back and message that. Right. Sure. So I think that will help through these turbulent times. But I thank all our clinicians, right? All our healthcare providers right now. It's going to be another interesting year, but I think patients are coming back, and it's a good thing.
Yeah, it seems like there's a light at the end of the tunnel finally. But what's, scary to think about, which I'm sure your organization is dealing with on the daily basis, is the cost of labor has gone up 20, 30% in health systems. The operating costs, the cost of products and materials have gone up 20, 30%. The cost of operating a hospital has gone through the roof. Are the reimbursements for surgeries going up 20%? No, I've heard they've stayed stagnant or decreased in some instances. Right? So how can a non-for-profit or a community hospital or health systems that don't have big research and academia dollars pouring in, how do they survive when their margins are going, whoop?
Yeah, no, it's a very astute observation. And we're seeing it, right? I remember I did a big presentation, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, and the average hospital margin was 4%, right? And then it was 2%, and now it's negative, right? And it is just that pinch is just going to keep happening. So there's a lot happening in legislation. There's a lot happening with the midterm elections to try to right size that because it is a problem, and it's a particular problem for the community-based hospitals. Yeah. And the community hospitals in areas of the country that don't have a great payer mix. Yeah. And that's where care is really neat. Like, we are creating, they call them food deserts, right? We're creating care deserts across America because of this phenomenon.
Sure.
And so we need to get as efficient as we can, right? A lot of people are thinking about diversifying their revenue streams and think about co-opetition. I talk to a lot of people in these communities, like how you may have thought that other community hospital was your greatest competitor, but it might also be your greatest ally.
Sure.
Right. And so think about, especially from a surgical services perspective, right? How can you manage that network so that you can remain efficient? And remember, surgery is your
bread and butter.
Right? And so how do you make sure that is working as well as it can be, while some of these larger, more systemic issues in Washington or with the payers need to be worked out?
Yeah, that was my next thought, was the maybe not low-hanging fruit, but one of the immediate things a health system could do to try to maintain any type of profitable margin is to reach out to a group like yours to figure out how they can optimize their operating rooms with patients that are already coming in and for cases that are already scheduled, but how do you maximize every single day and find cost savings along those processes?
Absolutely. So thank you for saying that, Elliot. I try not to plug my own organization in these types of things, but that's the thing. We guarantee at least a 300% return, right? Because wow. There's so much opportunity in this space. Mm-hmm. And And we're here, we're here to help. So sometimes it's helpful to have an outside organization look at it and share some of the leading practices across the country and the globe to maximize performance.
Absolutely. A fresh perspective is always helpful. And you guys work with organizations throughout the country in different markets, different sizes, different payer mixes. So you really have a unique perspective and experience that a standalone health system would never be able to do internally. So for our audience out there, we would recommend for health systems to look into companies like Surgical Directions to find gaps that they just haven't fully flushed out yet in their surgical room efficiencies. And Leslie, thank you so much for your time today. We really enjoyed chatting with you. I know our audience will have some really great takeaways. We'd love to follow up with you in a few months, maybe sometime next year, to catch up with you and hear what's the latest and greatest happening over at Surgical Directions.
I would love that, Elliot. Thank you so much. And thank you to the Macallan Group for sponsoring this and for hosting this. And yeah, if people do have questions, feel free to reach out to Elliot or myself. We're happy to help, but this was an honor. Thank you.
Thanks again, Leslie. Have a wonderful day.
You too.